This place hates wickedness, loves peace, punishes crime, upholds the law, honours the righteous. How things change. We change. There's growth, there's movement, there's community, there's life. A tiny acorn that sprouted to grow into a great tree, housing many mini beasts, many birds, the boughs, the bark, the roots, the leaves, protected and nurtured its wild community, and then, with sweat and saw, down comes the tree to mill and carve, to make great beams, to bear beautiful art, to bring housing to people and power. Look how it stands still, 700 years in this place. Who made it? Who managed it? Who shaped this space, and who did it come from? Who will it be passed to? Today, the answer is you. Underneath the Guildhall, you'll find the covered space where markets are still held and have been for over 800 years. You can still buy fruit and veg on market days and find local produce. You may even find a performance happening here. This is the butter market. And if you look closely, you'll find the shackles where they used to tie prisoners who had been condemned by the courts.
St. Milburga's Well. Here at this well is where two ladies of Wenlock Abbey meet across the mists of time. The first is St. Milburga, eldest of the three daughters of King Meriwold of Maganset. Meriwold built the abbey here in 680, and Milburga became its second abbess in 687. There are many stories about her, some of which you will hear on this trail. Before the Guildhall was built in 1540, the abbey, or priory as it is also known, was the administrative centre of Wenlock, where justice was carried out and disputes settled. The second lady we meet here is Lady Catherine Milnes Gaskell. She signed the Abbey Visitors Book on the 17th of February 1877 as the bride of Charles Milnes Gaskell, Lord of the Manor, and she lived there for many years in the renovated Prior's Lodging. She was an author of several fabulous books featuring local stories and traditions, and also supported the health, well-being and education of the community of Wenlock. The well is said to have provided water for the abbey, and the stone housing that bears Milburga's name was constructed in 1897. In her book, Spring in a Shropshire Abbey, Lady Catherine writes about the healing powers of the well. A young girl, Fanny Milner, had come to collect water for her grandmother. Though they had water at home, she had been sent for the water from St. Milburga's well, as it was said to cure sore eyes. Fanny said, "Grandam says I must get some from here, or she'll never be able to read a chapter come Sunday afternoon, with glasses or no glasses. Grandam says as it have a greater power of healing than ever lies in doctors' messes, or than in bought stuffs neither. It be a blessed water, and was washed in by a saint. And when saints meddle with water, they makes a better job of it than any doctor, let him be fit to burst with learning." There was also a custom on Holy Thursday of maidens throwing crooked pins into the well and wishing for a sweetheart. The young men would parade around the town with green branches and drink toast with beer said to be brewed with water collected from the church roof.
There certainly remains were thought to have been found under Much Wenlock's parish church, now called Holy Trinity, and this helped the town continue to flourish as a religious destination. It grew in wealth and status under the extended priory well into the Middle Ages, until it was finally closed in 1540 with Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. Pilgrims were such a big business for the town that a whole tourist industry of accommodation, food, trade, souvenirs and craftsmen sprung up around them. Occupied first by Neolithic, Bronze Age and Iron Age tribes, then the Romans, this desirable destination was in some ways ready-made for the Anglo-Saxons to move in, then the Normans, the Tudors and the Victorians to follow. The houses around the town are like a historical timeline. Stone villas, a ruined abbey, timbered mansions, stone cottages, red-bricked manor houses, all converging around the priory as a place of pilgrimage. The underwater waters of Much Wenlock were here long before its white church or Winlochia, the Celtic word from which the town takes its name. My real interest lies in the very early stages of this town's formation as a settlement around water and its possible origins as a centre for pagan water worship. In the 7th century, Wenlock was known as Wimicas, from the Gaul river named Vimina, in reference to the streams which meet here. The town sits in a bowl. The surrounding hills and fields filter water down via streams into that bowl, to an underground reservoir of water, which then emerges in the many springs and wells that rise around the town.
Now, Much Wenlock today is a quintessentially English town full of lots of history, a charter and all that. But in the day, it was a quarry town. And in quarry towns, you get quarrymen, as they say in Shropshire. Well, there was certainly a quarryman in this story, because he worked in the quarry by day, doing his 16-ton and all that. But every night he went round all the pubs, and there were 17 in them days. And he had a glass in each, and a glass in each means half a pint in each. So that's a gallon and a half. And that's what he did from the time he was 17, 18 to the time he was nearly 40. But on Sundays was the best day. For Sundays he went round twice, because it was God's day. That meant he wasn't working. That meant he could go a drinking. So once round in lunchtime, quit, sit down for half an hour, and around again in the evening. And he did that for the same length of time. But on the first of those trips round one Sunday, when he was coming up 40 years old, he went past the Methodist church. He was going from the stalk to the British flag. And as he came round the corner, the Methodists were all coming out, and there was a new Methodist minister. A new Methodist minister had brought his wife and his 17-year-old daughter. And they were standing there as he walked past, and Cupid hit him straight in the heart, and his jaw dropped, and he looked round, and he just stood there. He couldn't say anything. Unwashed and unshaved as he was, he just stood there. And off he wandered. But he couldn't get her out of his mind. He wasn't going to go to church, but the next Sunday, just timing it right as the Methodist came out, and there he was in his Sunday best, all shaved and all looking as cool as he could. He walked up to the little girl, the 17-year-old daughter, and said, "Perhaps I could escort you home, Mum." And she looked in panic at her father and her mother, and her father said, "Perhaps not this day, son." And he turned and he walked away, his heart a-fluttering. Well, the third time, he walked past exactly the same time, but the Methodist minister, he'd been asking around. And he knew he was the town drunk, and he knew that if he could convert him to sobriety, he'd be famous. It was worth having a shot at, so he'd had a word with his daughter. And the third time, he stopped and said, "Maybe I could walk you home today, all dressed up as he was?" She said yes, and they walked straight across the road, about 4 yards. "This is my gate," she said, and she ran up the path. Oh, well, things were moving on as far as he was concerned. And the next time it happened again. But this time they walked a bit further, and the time after that they walked a bit further, and the time after that they went up along the Wenlock edge to the talking tree, overlooking Harley, and they came down, and it was the first time he'd missed his beer on a Sunday lunchtime for many a year. But that day he got down on one knee, and he said these words, "Would you do me the honour of being my wife?" Well, she looked at him in complete horror. "You," she said. "You? Why would I marry you? You're old and you're smelly, and you've got no education. You're just terrible. I would not marry you if you were the last person on earth." She slammed the gate, ran down the path, and she got behind the door and gave it the biggest slam you've ever seen in your life. The whole cottage just about rattled. Well, on one knee with a ring, he put it back in his waistcoat pocket. Tears with his eyes, he walked off. But that day he didn't go round twice. That day he went round 3 times. That day he drank a glass and a small little whiskey to go with it. And he finished up 4 o'clock in the morning, sitting on the wall between the prison down in Wenlock and the church. And there they found him. Because that night, as somebody had climbed through the groundstairs window of a bedroom and taken a knife and put it through her heart, so hard it had stuck into the bedboards.
Wenlock Edge was once a reef in a subtropical sea, a pushed-up underwater shelf of ocean, hence all the fossils in my garden. It stretches as a limestone escarpment for nearly 20 miles, rising just below Much Wenlock to run like a wild woodland motorway all the way to Craven Arms. I love this place. and I walk in those woods every day. It's what anchors me to the little town most of all. It's a place of long human settlement and throws up reminders of times past hidden in the shape of the landscape and the soil beneath. There's a long history held on Wenlock Edge, and the stone itself tells the longest story of all. Laid down under a tropical sea some 400 million years ago, its stone has been quarried for millennia, from early Roman times at least, used by them in the construction of the nearby old Watling Street Road and for their county capital of Viraconium at Wroxeter, and also in the nearby Roman villas under Edgewoods. Later in the Middle Ages it was used by the monks for building Wenlock Priory and the lower part of our Guildhall, and many of the old houses around Much Wenlock, and also the new ones. The edge forms a border between the flat plains of fields below and higher levels above. Now hidden in trees, it's a place between places, a landscape and history so rich it lends itself to all kinds of legends of bandits and highwaymen. Its riddle paths feel like a game of snakes and ladders that disappear off into overgrown drovers' paths. You can easily slip down them and end in a totally different world. There are old sunken medieval trackways, or hollowways as I call them, which I love to wander down, some impossibly overgrown and hidden, others eroded into steeply sided deep chasms. I often come here alone, without the excuse of walking the dog even, and deliberately go down off these lost trodden trails where I won't see anyone. There's a shift when walking on your own, not engaged in noisy conversation, just paying close attention to the sounds, sights and smells around you. If you listen carefully, they all sound different, like learning to identify birdsong. The changing quality of the crunch of your feet stepping on dry leaves, cracked twigs, thick mud, stony paths, long prickly grass, sticky cleavers, carpets of pine needles, or last year's beech nuts. Then comes the heavy silence as you travel down, further into the stillness and the shade of the dense pine plantation below. I dip through the slopes, the wooded paths, and sometimes cut between impossibly steep mountain bike trails to the bottom track. Past ash, beech, birch, holly, oak, rowan, larch and yew. This is where I go off path, following fresh deer and badger tracks, through the dry scrunch of last year's leaf fall into dappled shade and delicious fresh green of soft new beech leaves, slipping away now to wind through the old hollowway. It's so high in some places that I'm plunged into damp darkness despite the sunshine. I try the old Hooper's Law hedge dating system, simplified to 100 years for every species of tree counted along a 30-metre stretch. Ash, beech, birch, hazel, hawthorn, holly, hornbeam, ivy, larch, lime, oak, pine, rowan, sycamore and yew. That's a potential of at least 1,500 years old, and actually I suspect it could be older, as we know people made tracks through these woods to the Bronze Age and Iron Age settlements nearby and the later Roman villas on the lower slopes below. It's easy to imagine those feet over 1,000 years wearing the track down in this hollow. The sides stretch up around me to 20 feet high, and I pass underneath an ancient yew and ash, wrapped in 100-year embrace.
Lights coming, days changing. Lights coming, days changing. Up on the edge, up on the edge, up on the edge. The light is glowing. stretching out the days. I can feel my body responding. Darkness is erased. Lights coming, days changing, wheels turning, earth is waiting. Up on the edge, up on the edge, up on the edge. The wheel is turning. Birds bursting, birds singing, sun warming, soil thawing. Up on the edge, up on the edge, up on the edge. The birds are singing. Sun shines and light grows, stretching out the days. I can feel my body responding. Darkness is erased. Lights coming, days changing. Lights coming, days changing. Up on the edge, up on the edge, up on the edge. The light is growing. The light is growing. The light is growing. The light is growing.
Umbilicus, a poem for Much Wenlock by Andy Jukes. A woman, eyes waxing, weary, long-haired and distant, makes her way down the silent high street. Past closed bookshops and empty restaurants, she remembers the chatter of customers queuing outside Paddy's butcher's, and beery laughter spilling through the narrow doors of the George. Behind them, quieter, she hears carols ghosting the town square. Fainter still, the footsteps of Dr. Brooks, hurrying to meet with town leaders, to tell them of his plans to save them from the drunkenness for which the town is renowned. Clouds of cheering rise from the Linden field, punctuated by the crack of starting pistols, signalling the start of Olympian dreams. Just outside, up on the edge of things, each summer at Stokes's barn, stories tumble from tented tongues and alien brogues roll down towards the town, there to meet the songs of poets, whose rhymes and rhythms summon forth waters from the Silurian limestone, on which and of which this town is built. A man, eyes shining, welly-booted, tussle-haired and ruddy, paddles his black coracle down the flooded high street. Past closed banks and sandbags, past the chemist's that was an ironmonger's, past the gents' outfitter's that was a candle shop, that was, that is, that will be. Carried on rising waters, past the flicker book of merchants and landlords, past Shite Brook and Holy Wells, like a pilgrim, he floats past Guildhall towards Holy Trinity Church, where the bones of St Milburger still ensure a healthy crop for Shropshire farmers. Past Priory ruins, the current leads him to Downs Mill, where the slow grind of days mills the kernels of history into a fresh flower. A child, smiling lightly, barefoot, scar-shinned and happy, runs down the busy high street. In his hand he holds a fossil found on Wenlock's edge. Ammonite memory that the ground beneath his feet was once the bottom of an ancient ocean. This town around him is built of a permeable stone, stone that flows and adapts and endures. He senses the burgage plots behind the shop fronts, counts the rings on the oaks of the timbers, feels the comfort of deep strata. He races on, past Bullring and Bastards Hall, across the school field, cricket ground and bowling green, up Windmill Hill to where a new sail begins to turn, gathering the winds of change. An old woman walks along a wooded path towards a sacred spring, carrying offerings from her tribe. As she walks, past oak, ash and rowan, strange visions rise from the land and permeate her ancient mind. A hoof stamps down and breaks a golden rock. Water flows from the fissure and restores life to a dying girl. Barley grows from seed to harvest in the passing of a single moon. Great buildings taller than a man's reach grow from the golden stone beneath her feet. Smaller buildings spring up around them, made from the same stone. People, more than she has ever seen, flow like a great river through these buildings. They are drawn, as pilgrims, to this place that sits in a bowl upon high ground, like the navel in the belly of a woman, swollen with life-bearing water and about to give birth. This place, ever-changing and resilient, deep and unfathomable, founded by a holy princess, pierced by sacred springs, to irrigate fertile soils, to bring forth generous fields, to feed the mouths of industry. Birthplace of dreams, home to saints and Olympians, farmers and guildsmen, poets and storytellers. Civil war, pestilence, plague and flood have pounded at its doors time after time. Still it stands, still it stands. The old woman places deer flesh and mugwort beside the sacred spring. She sheds her mortal form and dives into water's mouth. Down she swims, deep down, deeper. She emerges in an underground lake, beside which lies a great sleeping dragon. And an eye, older than time, flicks open once more.
Holy Trinity Church. The church you see today is said to be built on the foundation of the nuns' church of St Milburga's Abbey. Milburga was said to be blessed with beauty, elegance and intelligence, and became the second abbess in the year 687. There are many stories about her and her miracles. She could talk to the birds. She could make a field of barley grow in a single day. She called water forth from the earth to heal a wound when she fell from her horse, and she caused the river Corve to flood to escape the unwelcome advances of a prince. But one miracle happened right here in Wenlock. One day, as Milburga was praying in the chapel, a mother approached her with a child in her arms. The boy had been ill and died, and the mother pleaded with Milburga to bring him back to life. "That is something I cannot do," said Milburga. "You must bury him and accept the bereavement the Lord has given you." But the mother said she would not leave until her child was brought back to life. Milburga began to pray. The words flowed from her tongue up to heaven itself, and a ring of fire surrounded Milburga, the mother, and the boy. The flames burned bright and fierce, but when they flickered away and disappeared, neither saint, nor mother, nor son had been harmed. The mother held her son close and smiled as he opened his eyes. Milburga's bones were discovered here at the beginning of the 12th century. 2 boys were playing in the church ruins when they fell into a hole that had appeared in the ground. The smell of summer flowers filled the air, and the grave of St Milburga had been found. A new abbey had been built, and pilgrims came from far and wide to pray and seek healing. Centuries later, in the time of Henry VIII, Milburga's bones were removed from the abbey during the dissolution of the monasteries, and were burned on a fire in the market square in front of where the Guildhall now stands. Milburga's bones may be gone, But her stories live on, and now you know some of them.
If you turn left out of the Guildhall and skirt round the back of the church, under the weeping willow behind the Pennybrooks family graves, and go over to the back wall of the nave, the oldest part of the building, you'll see long grooves that have been gouged out in lines into the blocks of stone. They tell the story of another time in history, a time in the reign of Edward I in 1285, when archery targets were set up in every town. Edward III went a step further years later and made it law for all able men between 16 and 60 to practice archery every Sunday after church and on every holiday or feast day. A time when the common man had to be ready at any moment to fight for their king should he so desire it, meaning that all of our ancestors at some point would have used a longbow, as archery skills were an essential part of a military force. The gouges in the stone blocks of this church show where the arrows were sharpened, their facings worn down over time and further deepened by hundreds of years of weather damage. I imagine the men standing there, chatting and dawdling away their time, honing their arrowheads before releasing them into the butts on the church green. Even the stones here hold stories.
In between the prison and the church there's a low wall and now a bench, and he was laid over with his feet stuck up in the air. And they looked at his boots, and there was mud on his boots. And they took his boots off, and they went to the outside of the window, and there were footprints in the flower bed. And they put the boots in the footprints, and they matched. They knew they had their man, and into prison he went. Well, the whole town was aghast, and the whole town, and there he stayed in the little prison. And people walked past banging the door and all sorts, and he just sat there. And he came to the trial in the Guildhall. There the judge was there, and the jury, and the words across the top of the beams. And there the trial was held, and the judge asked for the evidence. And they brought the boots and said, "We put the boots in the footprints," and they matched. Well, the judge said, "Where's the plaster cast?" What you're supposed to do is do a plaster cast of the footprint and a plaster cast of the boot, and you're supposed to show me the two. You can't just say you put them in the footprint. What was there before, you destroyed. That's no evidence. I can't convict or hang a man for this. And the sheriff turned round and he said, "But we know he did it." And the judge looked at him and went, "I don't care what you think, you've got to have evidence. Evidence is the word." And he instructed the jury to leave, for there was no evidence and they could not convict him. And he turned round and he looked in the pulpit. He said, "You got anything to say?" And the quarryman, he said this, "If I did this evil deed, may the devil get me." And he turned and he walked down the steps of the Guildhall and up into the town and went and sat in a pub and had a drink as he would. Well, in all this little story you're hearing too, the one person that was the most heartbroken of all was the mother of the minister, her only daughter. Well, something tricked in her mind and she couldn't think any more, and all she was consumed with everything that happened. And she went up to Granny Morgan and she bought some kisses. And she walked down every time he sat in the pub for a glass of beer, he cursed her. "I curse you by the river and curse you what's in it. I curse you by the monasteries, the priory and the build was. I curse you by the trees, I curse you by the stars, I curse you by the rainbows. I curse you by everything that I hold sacred. You murdered my daughter and you got away with it. I curse you, I curse you, I curse you." Well, you couldn't settle for a pint if someone's fooling round doing that. And no one was talking to him anyway, and he lived alone, he didn't have anything to lose, so he decided to emigrate. So he went to Bridgnorth and ended up in Kidderminster. And there he stopped and he got a job in a carpet factory. And that would be the end of this little story, apart from one thing. About 3 weeks later, off the great looms that weave the carpets for the great and the good across our land, there was a crash and a bang and a bit fled off, and it hit him right in the temple. right at the temple on the left side, and it killed him stone dead. The people were there, wrote afterwards, that it seemed that the soul of his body had left before his body, what was left of his human remains, hit the ground. So he's gone as well. But the only thing that's strange about it is this. The bit that fled off the loom was called the Flying Devil.
Abbey Fields. Long ago, these fields belonged to the abbey at Wenlock. Milburger was the abbess, but she did not spend all her time in the cloisters and within the walls. She would ride out on her horse to visit the people of her community. It was on one such ride that she came across a group of villagers desperately looking across a field. The field was covered in geese, and the geese were pecking at the newly planted grain. Milburger asked if she could help them. The villagers told her that no matter what they tried, the geese ignored them. Even the scarecrows don't seem to be doing anything. Thought Milburger. The scarecrows don't seem to be doing anything. So she put her hands together in prayer and asked for help from the Lord above. The villagers' faces lost their desperate look. Now they were filled with awe and wonder. The scarecrows were moving, not just a twitch here and there in the breeze. Their legs and arms were waving around. They pulled their feet from the earth and began to dance. Around and around they swirled among the geese. One by one, the geese looked up, and seeing the wonder of the dancing scarecrows, they flew away. The villagers cheered and thanked Milburger. When she returned to the abbey later that day, what did she see? Geese on the abbey field, pecking at the newly planted grain. She rode into the field and began to talk to them. She was blessed with the power of talking with birds, robins and wrens, crows and curlews, but today she was speaking goose. Well, the geese looked up. They'd never heard a human speak their language before. She asked them why they were taking the grain, and explained that it needed to grow to feed the people of Wenlock. Then she told them to go to the banks of the river. It had flooded last week, and now the land on the banks was rich with food and would provide a fine feast for them. The geese thanked her and promised never to take the grain from her fields again. And as far as I know, the geese do not take the grain from the fields around Wenlock to this day, because of the promise they made to Milburger.
And
This place hates wickedness, loves peace, punishes crime, upholds the law, honours the righteous. This place hates wickedness, loves peace, punishes crime, upholds the law, honours the righteous.